The champagne tasted like victory. But Elena Kramer barely registered the bubbles on her tongue as she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel ballroom, watching Manhattan glitter 40 stories below. She had just closed the biggest pharmaceutical deal of her career, securing distribution rights that would revolutionize affordable medication access across 3 continents. And yet all she felt was hollow. 29 years old, Vice President of Global Operations at Medicare Solutions, and she could not remember the last time she had laughed until her stomach hurt or woken up without her phone alarm screaming at her. "You look like someone who just conquered the world but forgot why she wanted to," a deep voice said beside her. Elena turned to find a man who looked equally out of place at this celebration. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell slightly across his forehead and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to cut through the pretense of the room. He wore his tuxedo like armor, but his bow tie hung loose around his neck, and there was something raw in his expression that matched the exhaustion she felt in her bones. "Is it that obvious?" she asked. "Only to someone feeling the same thing." He extended his hand. "Quinn Everhart." She shook it, noting the calluses that seemed unusual for someone at a pharmaceutical industry gala. "Elena Kramer. Should I know you?" "God, I hope not." He laughed, and it was a genuine sound that made her smile despite herself. "I'm here because my company just merged with one of the sponsors. Maritime shipping, not medicine. I know absolutely nothing about pharmaceuticals except that aspirin helps hangovers." "Then why do you look as miserable as I feel?" Quinn glanced around the room filled with executives networking, champagne flowing, deals being whispered over canapes. "Because I spent the last 6 months negotiating this merger, working 18-hour days, and when we finally signed the papers this morning, my first thought was not celebration. It was wondering what happens next, what I've been running toward all this time." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Here was someone who understood. Not the ambition or the drive, everyone in this room had that, but the strange emptiness that came with achieving everything you were supposed to want. "You want to get out of here." The words left her mouth before her brain caught up. Quinn's eyebrows rose. "And go where?" "Anywhere that is not here." 20 minutes later they were walking through Times Square, still in formal wear, completely overdressed and somehow completely comfortable. Elena had kicked off her heels and carried them in one hand, her bare feet on the surprisingly warm pavement of a late spring night. Quinn had ditched his jacket somewhere, rolled up his sleeves, and kept making her laugh with observations about the tourists and street performers. "That guy dressed as Elmo definitely has a philosophy degree," Quinn said, nodding toward a slightly tattered costume. "You can tell by the existential despair in his wave." "You're terrible," Elena said, but she was grinning. They found a 24-hour diner in Hell's Kitchen, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. Elena ordered pancakes even though it was nearly midnight. Quinn got a burger and fries. They talked for hours. She learned he was 32, that he had built his shipping company from a single inherited cargo vessel into a fleet of 40 ships, that his father had been a naval officer who taught him to sail before he could ride a bike. He had no siblings, no wife or girlfriend, just an obsessive dedication to expansion that had consumed his 20s. He learned she had been a wonderkind, graduating high school at 16, college at 19, MBA at 21. That she had clawed her way up in a male-dominated industry through sheer competence and working harder than everyone else. That her parents were professors who loved her but never quite understood her corporate ambitions. That she was so tired of being strong all the time. "When do you let yourself be soft?" Quinn asked, his eyes serious across the table. I do not know if I remember how, Elena admitted. His hand found hers on the table, warm and solid. Want to try? They ended up at his hotel, the Plaza, a stunning suite that spoke to serious wealth even though he had downplayed his success. But Elena was not thinking about money or status or any of the calculations that usually governed her life. She was thinking about how Quinn looked at her like she was not a vice president or a deal closer or any of the armor she wore, but just Elena, a woman who was allowed to want something just for herself. They kissed by the window, Manhattan still glittering, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. His hands were gentle but sure, asking permission with every touch. She had not been with anyone in over a year, too busy, too focused, but this felt different from anything she remembered. This felt like connection, like two people who had been holding themselves together so tightly finally allowing themselves to come undone. They made love slowly, carefully, then urgently, then tenderly again as dawn started to lighten the sky. Elena fell asleep wrapped in Quinn's arms, more at peace than she had felt in years. She woke up alone. There was a note on the pillow, written in bold handwriting on Plaza stationery. Had to catch a flight. Last night was extraordinary. You are extraordinary. I hope you find what you are looking for, Elena. Quinn. No phone number. No last name she could easily track. She remembered he had said Quinn Everhart, but when she searched her phone later, she found dozens of Quinn Everharts, none obviously connected to maritime shipping. Elena told herself it was for the best. One perfect night, no complications, a memory to keep. She flew home to Boston the next day, threw herself back into work, and tried not to think about blue eyes and gentle hands and someone who understood the weight she carried. 3 weeks later, she was throwing up in her office bathroom. At first, she blamed food poisoning, then stress. Then she could not ignore the calendar anymore, could not pretend she did not know exactly when her last period had been. The pregnancy test she took in a CVS bathroom confirmed what her body already knew: pregnant. From one night. One perfect, impossible night with a man she could not find. Elena sat in her car in the pharmacy parking lot and cried for the first time in years. Not from sadness exactly, but from overwhelming fear and confusion and a strange, fierce joy she did not expect. She was pregnant. She was going to have a baby. Alone. The first person she told was her best friend Marcus, her college roommate who now worked as an architect in Boston. They met at their usual coffee shop, and Elena barely got the words out before she was crying again. Okay, breathe, Marcus said, rubbing her back. Walk me through this. Who's the father? A man I met in New York, one night. I do not even have his phone number. Did you get his name? Quinn Everhart. He said he owns a shipping company, but I cannot find him. Marcus, I'm vice president of a major pharmaceutical company. I'm 29. I'm not ready for this. Hey. Marcus caught her chin, made her look at him. You're Elena Kramer. You've never been ready for anything. You just did it anyway and made it work. You'll figure this out. What if I cannot find him? What if he does not want to know? Then you'll do it alone and you'll be amazing because you're always amazing. But let's try to find him first. Marcus became her detective. He dug into shipping companies, cross-referenced names, made calls. Finally, 2 weeks later, he found him. Quentin James Everhart, CEO of Everhart Maritime International, one of the largest privately held shipping companies in the world. Worth approximately $800 million. Operating out of New York with offices in 15 countries. Elena stared at the Forbes profile on Marcus's laptop, at Quinn's professional headshot. Same blue eyes, same strong jawline, but this version looked harder, more polished, nothing like the man who had walked through Times Square with her. $800 million, she whispered. Oh my God. Are you going to call him and say what? Hi, remember that night 3 months ago? Surprise, you're going to be a father. Well, yeah. He deserves to know, Elena. She knew Marcus was right. She spent a week crafting emails she never sent, rehearsing phone calls she never made. Finally, she just called Everhart Maritime International and asked for Quinn Everhart's office. May I ask what this is regarding? His assistant asked, polite but cool. It is personal. Please tell him Elena Kramer called. Mr. Everhart is traveling extensively and not taking personal calls at this time. If you leave your information, someone will get back to you. Elena left her number. No one called back. She tried 3 more times over 2 weeks, each time getting the same polite stonewalling. Either Quinn was truly that busy or he was avoiding her. Either way, the message was clear. She sent a letter to his corporate office, marked personal and confidential, explaining she needed to speak with him about an important matter from their meeting in May. That disappeared into the void, too. Maybe he does not want to be found, Marcus said gently. Or maybe he's just actually busy running an $800 million company, Elena countered. But doubt crept in. Maybe that night had meant nothing to him. Maybe he did this often, picked up women at galas and disappeared. At 4 months pregnant, Elena told her bosses. They were supportive but clearly concerned about her ability to maintain her grueling travel schedule. She assured them she would work until the last possible moment, that nothing would change. But everything was changing. Her body, her priorities, her entire future. At 5 months, she felt the baby kick for the first time during a budget meeting and had to excuse herself to cry in the bathroom again. She was having a girl, a daughter. Hers. At 6 months, she started preparing the nursery in her Boston townhouse, painting the walls herself a soft lavender. Marcus helped assemble furniture, and her mother came from Chicago to help organize baby clothes. Her father looked worried but tried to be encouraging. Are you sure you do not want our help moving back home? Her mother asked. Raising a baby alone in the city. Mom, I'm not alone. I have Marcus, I have my job, I have support. I can do this. But at night, when she was alone with her growing belly and her swirling thoughts, Elena wondered about Quinn. Did he ever think about that night? Would he want to know his daughter? Did she even have the right to disrupt his life? She had almost resigned herself to single motherhood when her company announced a major partnership summit in New York City. 7 months pregnant, Elena almost declined to go, but this was the culmination of the deal she had closed the night she met Quinn. She needed to be there. The summit took place at the Javits Center. Hundreds of pharmaceutical and medical supply companies gathering to discuss logistics and distribution. Elena waddled through the conference hall in a maternity dress she had bought specifically for the occasion, trying to feel professional despite her very obvious pregnancy. She was listening to a presentation on international shipping regulations when she saw him. Quinn stood near the back of the room, wearing a dark suit, looking exactly as she remembered but somehow different. Harder, maybe. More distant. He was listening to the speaker with focused attention, occasionally making notes on his phone. Elena's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. She had to grip the chair in front of her. After the presentation ended, she watched Quinn get swarmed by executives wanting to network. She started to approach, then lost her nerve. What was she supposed to say? How was she supposed to tell him? She was turning to leave when a voice said, "Elena." She turned. Quinn stood 5 feet away, staring at her stomach with an expression she could not read. Shock, maybe confusion, something else. "Quinn." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He crossed the distance between them, his eyes never leaving her face. "I tried to find you. After that night, I tried to find you, but I only had your first name and there are hundreds of Elena Kramers in the world. I did not know which pharmaceutical company you worked for. You tried to find me. For weeks. I went back to that diner I called the gala organizers. I asked everyone I could think of. Then my company went through the merger and everything got complicated and He stopped, his eyes dropping to her stomach again. How far along are you? 7 months. She watched him do the math, saw the realization hit. Is it mine? Yes. Quinn sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Elena sat beside him, her heart still racing. I tried to contact you, she said quickly. I called your office, I sent letters. Your assistant kept stonewalling me. I was in Singapore for 2 months finalizing shipping routes. Then in South America. My assistant has instructions to filter personal calls because I was getting harassed by. He trailed off, shook his head. It does not matter. You were trying to tell me this whole time, since I found out. 3 months ago. I have a daughter. His voice cracked on the word. I do not know yet. I wanted it to be a surprise. Quinn laughed, but it sounded almost hysterical. A surprise. Elena, I've been searching for you for months. That night it meant something to me. It meant everything to me. And then I woke up and had to catch a plane for the merger negotiations. And I left that stupid note like an idiot. And I have regretted it every single day since. It meant something to me too, Elena whispered. He reached for her hand the same way he had in that diner. I want to be part of this, part of your life, part of our baby's life, if you'll let me. I do not need your money, Quinn. I have a good job I can provide for. I am not talking about money. His blue eyes were fierce. I am talking about being a father, being there, being with you if you want that. Elena felt tears spilling down her cheeks. You do not even know me. I know you worked yourself to exhaustion chasing other people's definitions of success. I know you laugh at terrible jokes about Elmo. I know you cried when you talked about forgetting how to be soft. I know I have not stopped thinking about you for 6 months. That's enough for me to want to try. I live in Boston. You live in New York. Boston has ships. I can work from anywhere. Quinn, you cannot just upend your whole life because I got a woman pregnant. Because I have a responsibility. He shook his head. No. Because I found you again and I'm not stupid enough to let you go twice. They talked for hours after the conference ended, in a quiet corner of a hotel restaurant. Elena told him about the pregnancy, about her fears and plans, about the nursery she was building. Quinn told her about his frantic search, about how that night had woken something in him he had been suppressing for years, about how he wanted to be a better man than his own father had been. He was Navy, Quinn said, gone 9 months out of the year. When he was home, he was this distant figure who barked orders and expected obedience. I swore I would never do that to my own kids. And you built a shipping company that requires constant travel, Elena said gently. I know. The irony is not lost on me, but Elena, I can change that. I have been building this company for 10 years, and I have good people in place. I can step back from day-to-day operations, focus on strategy. I can be present. That is a massive change based on one night and a baby you did not know existed until 2 hours ago. No. Quinn's hand covered hers on the table. It's a massive change I've needed to make for years. You and this baby are just giving me a reason to finally do it. They agreed to take things slowly. Quinn would come to Boston the following weekend to see her place, to talk more, to figure out what this could be. Elena felt cautiously hopeful as she flew home, her hand resting on her belly, whispering to her daughter that maybe, just maybe, they would not be alone after all. Quinn arrived that Friday night with flowers and a stuffed elephant and an expression so nervous that Elena wanted to hug him. She gave him a tour of her townhouse, showed him the half-finished nursery. Lavender, he said, touching the walls. That's perfect. You can help me finish it if you want. They spent the weekend painting and assembling the crib and talking. Quinn was staying at a hotel, but he was at her place from morning until night. He asked 1,000 questions about the pregnancy, about her doctor appointments, about what she needed. He grocery shopped and cooked dinner and rubbed her swollen feet while they watched movies. It felt domestic and surreal and wonderful. "This is crazy," Elena said on Sunday night as they sat on her couch, his hand resting on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "We barely know each other." "Then let's fix that. Tell me everything. Favorite color, biggest fear, what you wanted to be when you grew up." "Blue, failing at something important. A veterinarian until I realized I was too squeamish about blood." Quinn laughed. "Green, being like my father, a pirate." "A pirate." "I was 7. It seemed very practical." "You became a shipping magnate, close enough." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Quinn started spending half his time in Boston. He rented a furnished apartment near her townhouse, installed a home office, and video conferenced into meetings at odd hours. His team adjusted. His company functioned. Elena watched him transform from a workaholic CEO into someone who took weekends off and asked about her day, and learned everything there was to know about infant care. At 8 months pregnant, Elena went into early labor during a snowstorm. She called Quinn, trying not to panic, and he was there in 10 minutes, driving carefully through the snow to the hospital. Her water broke in the car, and she was mortified until Quinn said calmly, "It's just water. It will clean. You're okay. We're okay." The labor was long and hard and scary. 22 hours of contractions and exhaustion, and Elena crying that she could not do this, could not be a mother. What had she been thinking? Quinn held her hand and told her she was the strongest person he knew, and she could do anything, and he was right there with her. Their daughter was born at sunrise, 6 pounds 9 ounces, screaming her displeasure at the world. The nurse placed her on Elena's chest, and Elena looked down at this tiny, perfect, furious human and fell completely in love. "She's beautiful," Quinn whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She looks just like you." "She has your nose," Elena said, laughing and crying at the same time. They named her Sophie Rose Kramer. Elena wanted her to have Quinn's last name too, but he said, "Not yet. Let's wait until we're sure about us. She's a Kramer for now." Sophie came home 3 days later to the lavender nursery, to a house suddenly filled with baby equipment and anxious grandparents, and Marcus taking 1,000,000 photos. Quinn moved into the guest room without asking, and Elena did not argue. She needed him. They both needed each other as they stumbled through those first brutal weeks of new parenthood. Sleepless nights and endless feedings, and Sophie crying for no reason they could determine. Elena cried too, overwhelmed and hormonal, and terrified she was doing everything wrong. Quinn walked the floors at 3 in the morning, Sophie against his shoulder, singing off key sea shanties he remembered from his father. "You're a natural," Elena said one night, watching him change a diaper with practiced efficiency. "I'm terrified every second of every day," he admitted. "But I love her so much it feels like my chest might explode." "I know exactly what you mean." They fell into a rhythm, a partnership. Elena took maternity leave from her job, something she had never imagined doing for more than a few weeks. But she wanted this time with Sophie, wanted to figure out who she was as a mother. Quinn scaled back his company involvement even more, promoting his COO and focusing on strategic decisions that did not require constant travel. They were co-parenting beautifully. They were friends. They were something more than friends, stealing kisses over the baby, holding hands on walks through the park, falling asleep together on the couch while Sophie napped between them. But they had not defined it, had not made it official. both too scared to push too hard and break the fragile thing they were building. Sophie was 3 months old when Elena woke up one night to find Quinn's side of the bed empty. He had started sleeping in her room 2 weeks ago, both of them too exhausted to maintain separate spaces. She found him in the nursery, holding Sophie by the window, moonlight painting them both silver. "Could not sleep?" Elena asked quietly. "I was thinking about the night we met," Quinn said. "How lost I felt, how empty everything seemed despite all the success. And now look at this. Look at what we made." Elena wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her cheek against his back. "Are you happy? Happier than I have ever been in my entire life." Terrified, exhausted, completely overwhelmed, but happy. He turned to face her, Sophie still cradled in one arm. "I love you, Elena. I know it's fast. I know we did everything backward, but I love you. I think I loved you from that first night." "I love you too," Elena whispered. "I tried not to, tried to keep some distance in case this did not work, but I love you so much." He kissed her, careful not to jostle Sophie, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. Quinn proposed 2 months later in the most unromantic setting possible. Their living room at midnight, both of them covered in spit up, Sophie finally asleep after hours of colic. He got down on one knee with no ring, no speech prepared, and said, "Marry me, make this official, make us a family." Elena said yes before he even finished talking. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at a Boston marina, Sophie in a white dress sleeping through most of the vows. Elena's parents were there, dabbing at their eyes. Marcus was the best man, giving a speech about how Elena had always needed someone to remind her to live outside work. And Quinn had done that before he even knew he was doing it. Quinn's mother came from Seattle, a quiet woman who hugged Elena tight and whispered, "Thank you for loving my stubborn son." Elena wore a simple cream dress, no veil, no elaborate production. Quinn wore a navy suit that matched his eyes. They said their vows on the dock, boats bobbing in the harbor behind them, promising to love and support and show up for each other even when it was hard. "Especially when it is hard," Quinn added, making everyone laugh. The reception was at a waterfront restaurant, casual and joyful. Elena danced with her father, with Marcus, with Quinn, who held her close, and whispered that she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Even covered in spit up at midnight, especially then. They honeymooned in Maine, just a week at a coastal cottage with Sophie. It was not glamorous, but it was perfect. Long walks on the beach, Sophie bundled up against the wind, dinners of fresh lobster and local wine, making love quietly while their daughter slept in the portable crib nearby. "I never thought I would have this," Elena said one evening, curled up against Quinn on the porch swing. "A family, peace, someone who actually understands me. Same, I thought I would work myself to death alone and tell myself I was successful." "Are you sure you do not regret stepping back from the company?" Quinn kissed the top of her head. "I promoted good people. The company is doing better than ever, and I have not missed a single milestone with Sophie. I was there for her first smile, her first laugh, her first time sleeping through the night. I'll be there for everything else too. That is worth more than any shipping contract." Back in Boston, they merged their lives fully. Quinn sold his New York penthouse and his Boston apartment, moved completely into Elena's townhouse. They renovated, expanding to accommodate their growing family. Elena went back to work part-time, negotiating a consulting role that let her work from home most days. Quinn built a home office and managed Everhart Maritime remotely, traveling only when absolutely necessary and never for more than a few days. Sophie grew into a toddler, bright and curious and fearless. She had Quinn's blue eyes and Elena's dark hair, and a laugh that filled their entire house with joy. Quinn taught her to love the water, taking her to the marina to watch boats. Elena read to her every night, the same way her own parents had read to her. They had date nights, made a point of staying connected as a couple, not just as parents. Marcus babysat regularly, claiming Sophie was excellent practice for when he adopted kids himself. Elena's parents visited often, her father finally accepting that his daughter had found her own path to happiness. When Sophie was 2, Elena got pregnant again. They had been trying, both wanting Sophie to have a sibling close in age. This pregnancy was planned, celebrated, completely different from the first. Quinn went to every appointment, painted the nursery yellow for gender neutral, built a second crib. Their son, Lucas James Everhart, was born on a sunny October morning, fast and uncomplicated. He was bigger than Sophie had been, calmer, with Quinn's nose and Elena's eyes. Sophie was fascinated and slightly jealous, but Quinn was patient with her, making sure she knew she was still loved, still special. "You're a big sister now," Quinn told her seriously. "That's the most important job in the world." Sophie took it seriously, bringing Lucas toys, singing to him when he cried, reporting his every movement to her parents like a tiny spy. Elena watched her family expand and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for how completely her life had transformed. 5 years after that night in Manhattan, Elena stood in their backyard, watching Quinn push Sophie on the swing while Lucas toddled after butterflies. They had just celebrated Sophie's 5th birthday, and the yard was still littered with streamers and deflated balloons. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Marcus came up beside her, handed her a glass of wine. "You look happy." "I am, completely, ridiculously happy. Remember when you called me crying from that CVS parking lot? I was so scared. And now look at you. Married to a shipping magnate, 2 beautiful kids, working a job you actually enjoy instead of one that is killing you. It is weird, right? How one night changed everything. The best things usually are weird." Marcus clinked his glass against hers. "To weird, wonderful accidents." That night, after the kids were asleep, Elena and Quinn sat on their back porch, the way they did most evenings. His arm was around her shoulders, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "You ever think about that night?" Elena asked. "Wonder what would have happened if we had not left the gala together, all the time. I think we would have stayed miserable in our separate lives, working ourselves to death, never knowing what we were missing. I am glad you talked to me. I am glad you said yes to leaving." Quinn tilted her face up, kissed her softly. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Elena corrected. "The best was coming to Boston." "Fair point." They sat in comfortable silence, years of partnership and love making words unnecessary. Sophie and Lucas were asleep upstairs. Quinn's company was thriving under excellent management. Elena's consulting work was fulfilling without consuming her. They had family dinners and movie nights and arguments about whose turn it was to change diapers. They had a life. The following year, Quinn formally adopted Sophie, giving her his last name legally. She was 6 and old enough to understand what it meant. The courthouse ceremony was small, just family, but Sophie wore her fanciest dress and held Quinn's hand seriously as the judge made it official. "Now we are all Everharts," Sophie announced proudly afterward. "Now we are all Everharts," Quinn agreed, scooping her up. Elena watched her husband hold their daughter and felt tears prick her eyes. This was her family, whole and complete in hers. When Sophie was 8 and Lucas was 6, they took a family trip to Manhattan, stayed at the plaza in a massive suite. Quinn and Elena took the kids to the diner in Hell's Kitchen where they had eaten pancakes that first night. "This is where Daddy and I had our first date," Elena told the kids. "It is a weird place for a date," Sophie said skeptically, looking at the cracked vinyl booths. It was perfect, Quinn said, winking at Elena. They walked through Times Square, now with 2 kids in tow, nothing like that first night but somehow just as magical. They showed the kids where they had walked, where Quinn had made Elena laugh, where they had decided to take a chance on something they did not understand yet. "You think we would have found each other anyway?" Elena asked that night after the kids were asleep. "If I had not gotten pregnant, if we had not run into each other at that conference," Quinn pulled her close in the massive hotel bed. "I don't know. Maybe. I like to think we were meant to find each other somehow. Even if it took an unplanned pregnancy to make it happen. Especially then. Sophie brought us together. She gave us a reason to try." Elena thought about the terrified woman who had cried in that CVS bathroom, pregnant and alone, and convinced her life was falling apart. She wanted to go back and tell that woman everything would be okay. Better than okay. Perfect. But she could not go back. She could only be here in this moment with this man and these children and this completely unexpected life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Always." They fell asleep tangled together. The city that had brought them together glittering outside their window. Their children dreaming in the next room. Their future stretching out bright and certain and full of possibility. Years later, when people asked Elena about her greatest achievement, she did not mention her pharmaceutical deals or her consulting success. She talked about a gala she almost skipped, a man who looked as lost as she felt, a chance she took on a feeling she could not name. She talked about courage and love and happy accidents that turned into everything. Sophie graduated high school at the top of her class, planning to study marine biology. Her father's love of the ocean woven into her DNA. Lucas was following in Elena's footsteps, already talking about business school. They were good kids, raised with love and stability and parents who showed up for everything. Quinn eventually sold Everhart Maritime International when he was 52, retiring early to focus on philanthropy and spending time with family. He and Elena traveled, finally taking the honeymoons they had never had time for. They watched their kids grow into adults, become parents themselves. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Quinn recreated that first night. He took Elena to a pharmaceutical industry gala in Manhattan, wore a tuxedo with the bow tie hanging loose, met her by the window. "You look like someone who just conquered the world but forgot why she wanted to," he said, repeating his first words to her. Elena laughed, still beautiful at 54, still the woman who had taken his breath away. "Only to someone feeling the same thing. Want to get out of here." They walked through Times Square again, older and slower but still holding hands. They went to the diner, ate pancakes at midnight, talked like they were still figuring each other out. They went to the plaza, to a suite that was not quite the same but close enough, and made love like the strangers they had been and the partners they had become. "Do you have any regrets?" Elena asked in the darkness, his arm around her. "Not a single one. You." "Just that I wasted so many years before that night, before you. Those years made you who you are, the woman I fell in love with. The exhausted, workaholic control freak. The brilliant, driven, beautiful woman who was brave enough to leave a gala with a stranger." Elena kissed him soft and deep. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Quinn corrected, echoing her words from years ago. "The best was keeping our baby." "Fair point." They fell asleep the way they always did, wrapped around each other, still in love after 25 years, still grateful for the accident that became their always. Outside, Manhattan kept glittering, full of people searching for connection, some finding it, some not. But in that room, 2 people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully. Their love story complete, Their surprise baby now a grown woman with children of her own. Proof that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for. The next morning they flew home to Boston, to the house they had built together, to the family that had started with one night and became a lifetime. Sophie was there with her husband and 3-year-old twin daughters. Lucas was there with his fiancée, planning a wedding. The house was loud and chaotic and full of love. Quinn caught Elena's hand in the kitchen while she was making coffee, pulled her close, danced with her even though there was no music. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Appreciating my life. Appreciating you. You are sentimental in your old age. I am happy in my old age. There is a difference." Elena wrapped her arms around his neck, looked into eyes that were still the same blue that had caught her attention 25 years ago. "Me too. So incredibly happy." Their granddaughters ran through the kitchen shrieking, Sophie chasing after them, Lucas and his fiancée laughing at the chaos. This was family. This was everything. That night, after everyone had gone home, Quinn and Elena sat on their back porch like they had 1,000 times before. The stars were out and the air was warm and everything was exactly as it should be. "If you could go back," Quinn said quietly, "to that night at the gala, if you knew everything that would happen, all the fear and chaos and unexpected turns, would you still leave with me?" Elena did not hesitate. In a heartbeat, every single time, "I would leave that note with my phone number," he said, making her laugh. "But yes, every single time, you're my always, Elena. You are my always too." They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who had started as strangers, become parents, become partners, become each other's home. The surprise that had terrified them became their greatest gift. The one night that changed everything became the first night of forever. And somewhere in Manhattan, other people were taking chances, leaving galas, making decisions that would reshape their lives. Some would regret it. Some would treasure it. Quinn and Elena had been lucky enough to find treasure and they had protected it, nurtured it, built a life around it. Their story was not perfect. They had fought and struggled and figured things out as they went. But it was theirs, completely and wholly theirs, starting from champagne that tasted like victory and ending in a backyard in Boston with stars overhead and a lifetime of love behind them. Sophie called the next day to thank them for babysitting. "The girls wore you out, didn't they?" she teased. "We loved every second," Elena said honestly. "You were that age once, just as energetic. Dad tells me stories. How I never slept, how I cried all the time." "You were perfect. You are perfect. You gave us everything, Sophie." There was a pause, then Sophie's voice, thick with emotion. "I know you've told me the story 100 times, but tell me again, how you and Dad met." Elena smiled, settled into the couch, began the story that had become family legend. The gala, the champagne, the man by the window who changed everything. She told it the way she always did, with love and gratitude, and wonder that something so unplanned became so perfect. When she hung up, Quinn was watching her from the doorway. "She never gets tired of that story," Elena said. "Because it is a good story, it is our story. It is the best story." Quinn crossed the room, pulled her to her feet, kissed her like they were 29 and 32 again, like they were strangers taking a chance, like they were everything they had become. "I love you, Elena Everhart. I love you, Quentin Everhart." And that was how their story ended, the way all the best love stories end. Not with a dramatic gesture or a perfect moment, but with two people choosing each other every single day, grateful for the surprise that became their future, the one night that became forever, the love that started with champagne and grew into something that sustained them through every challenge, every joy, every ordinary and extraordinary moment of their lives together. Their daughter had brought them together, but they had done the work to stay together, to build something real and lasting and beautiful. And now, decades later, they could look back at that terrified woman in a CVS parking lot and that desperate man searching for someone he thought he had lost. And they could see that every difficult moment, every fear, every uncertainty had been worth it. Because they had found their way to each other. They had found their way home, and they lived, truly and completely and wonderfully, happily ever after.